Hi everybody, it's Jesse Lemieux from Pacific Permaculture again, and welcome to our micro farm here on Bowen Island, a beautiful June 4th of 2013, and we're just getting things going. We're lucky enough to have gotten a 3-year lease on this beautiful piece of land, and we're really excited about it because when we teach our PDCs here on Bowen Island, we are able to give people examples of permaculture in all of its applications, from the urban with our patio garden to the rural here with our micro farm, this beautiful little site. And so what I want to do today is just show you a little bit about some of the things we're doing here on our farm and how we're working with landscape patterning, particularly keyline patterning, in the development of this farm, so it makes sense, it works with water, it works with landscape, it works with the climate. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the information. So right here where I'm standing in our microfarm spot is something I'm actually really excited about, this serendipitous thing associated with this little piece of land, which was actually a horse pasture in the past. And we're lucky for that because it meant the land has been kept cleared, and so there's no big trees in the way. But it does need a little bit of work, particularly since we want to push it towards market garden status. And one of the most important things when you're laying out a market garden is making sure that you have pathways and that the geometry of things is organized most efficiently, not only for moving around and not only to match your tractor, but also for water, harmonizing with landscape to make watering easy. And so what we're going to be doing here is something called keyline geometry or keyline patterning. And so where I'm standing right now is actually a really important feature of keyline patterning, is because I'm standing in a valley line. You can see that it comes in as a bowl right here, and water will move off of that ridge and the ridge that you're standing on into this point and then channel off that way. And so what we're going to do with our bed patterning is we're going to put our beds off as close to contour as possible, but they can never be on contour. They can't be on contour because our tractor that we're going to use, which is probably going to be a small 2-wheel walk-behind tractor, is parallel. Contour lines are not parallel, right? And tractors are. So we can't actually go dead on contour, which is what the swale concept is. So we're going to use keyline patterning so that we can set this up in such a way as that it makes sense for tractor farming. Because if we want to do production vegetables for here on Bowen Island, or if we want to do production berries or whatever, we're going to want to be able to use tractor work. And so we want to make sure that we're designing our beds so that we can use tractors on them efficiently. If we were to do things completely on contour, that wouldn't work so well. So that's why we're patterning based on keyline patterning. So here's the valley point, and we're going to set our beds up in a herringbone pattern. So here we are at it, looking at this from a different angle, but I'm still standing in the valley line. The water is still collecting from either side of this valley here. The bowl, the 2 ridges on either side, the water was flow down to this point, and then it'll run down underneath my feet and straight down the middle of the valley. It's actually down in the bottom there's a wet spot. It's still wet now. And when we're having a large rain event, or it's been wet for a couple weeks, which happens here quite regularly on Bowen Island, we do have water flow that comes through this. Right back behind where you're standing, I've marked out the highest contour line, the highest longest contour line, the highest longest contour line that we have on this site. And that's what I've actually got staked out over here. So if you follow me, these wooden stakes here are actually marking out a true contour line. They mark out a true contour line. Now, a swale, which is a very common permaculture concept, is an on-contour water harvesting ditch, essentially. It's on contour, meaning when the water hits the swale, it stops flowing and it levels out and has an opportunity to soak in. Water always flows downhill at right angles to contour. Right? So if this is my contour line back here, all I have to do is stand and point in a perpendicular line to that line, and I know where water is going to flow in relation to this contour line. Doing things on contour is great because it slows the water down and gets it to soak in, but also pacifies the water to the point where there's no erosion. And that's why in permaculture design people get so excited about doing swales, is because if you want to reforest, they can be a really effective way to reforest. The problem happens when we want to maintain production agricultural activities that involve tractors. Because like I said before, contour lines aren't parallel and tractors are. So that means if you're running a tractor across a slope, or you're working a tractor across the land, you can never actually be on contour. You have to go off contour. So if we're going to go off contour, how should our pathways, our tractor roads, our garden beds be orientated in relation to overall landscape geometry? Valleys are places where water collects. Ridges are places where water sheds away from. So ridges are generally dry and valleys are generally wet. If you're going to have erosion problems, it's going to be in the valley. So what we want to do is we want to move water from the valleys out to the ridges. And we want to do it as slowly and passively as possible. And so that's what I've got marked out here. These are actually lines that are not on contour, but slightly off contour. And the way I've marked those out is by measuring from here to here in a perpendicular line from our true contour line that we've marked out. So this line here is the basis for the design of the rest of the system. And these stakes are 3 feet apart in a perpendicular line running off from the contour line that we've marked there. And I've done it at different intervals all the way down so that I can see where these lines are. Now these lines are our keyline geometry garden beds. And this is what we're using for the basis of digging and laying out our market garden here. Our garden dimensions, our bed dimensions, are actually 6 feet from here to here. That's a 48-inch growing bed with a 1 foot pathway on either side, so a total of 6 feet. And we're using those dimensions based on the recommendations of Elliot Coleman in his book, The New Organic Grower, because he recommends using 4 foot wide beds if you're using the walk-behind tractors with a 26-inch tiller. 2 passes on the tiller and you get the whole bed and a little bit of the pathways covered with 1 pass. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to harmonize our tractor activities with the water flow across the site. What I'm going to show you now is the actual procedure I use after I've measured out all of these beds for digging the bed. So here I am standing in the first 2 beds that I've dug using this keyline patterning, or the keyline basis, because we actually haven't marked out with that contour line that's uphill for me a true keyline. It's just representative of a keyline for us in this situation, and it's serving as our design basis for the rest of everything else. But here we are on the bottom 2 beds. This is the lower one. This is the 1 foot wide pathway. This is approximately 4 feet. It's pretty close. The next bed here is 4 feet, and then this pathway, as you can see, is wider than the one I'm currently in. This one is actually 2 feet wide, and I'm going to show you why that's the case in just a second here. But when I'm building these beds, I'm working from the bottom up because I'm moving soil down. So the first thing I need to do when I'm digging this bed is to actually take this material here and move it here so that I'm building a 1 foot bed. Right? I'm not throwing soil uphill. That's too much work. I'm always working with soil and moving it downhill. Hopefully it's the last time soil moves downhill. Up at that end where you're standing, the elevation of the pathway is slightly higher than it is at the end behind me. So water will move from where you are, which is actually in the valley line behind you. It will move downhill along the pathway. And so what we have is we've got a design that thwarts water's natural tendency to move this direction, because that's the way the water wants to go, is move in that direction towards the valley line, where it can cause erosion, waterlogging, and an overly wet soil system. What we want to do is we want to be able to move water when it rains out this way naturally so that it soaks into our garden beds. So we actually will have an option here to possibly flood irrigate these beds at some point in the future. So before I actually begin digging the bed, what I want to do is make sure that I'm doing the best to increase the soil depth and loosen the soil and make the soil friable. Now keep in mind that I'm doing this all handwork, so I'm doing this slow and steady thing, and really our goal this year with the garden is to build soil. Right? And a year building soil is not a wasted year. It's like putting money in the bank. We have to get this out of a perennial grass system and into a market garden system. And I'm trying to do that with as little machinery as possible. I didn't use a tiller making this bed. This is all just soil that I've taken out of the pathways and put on top. And it's actually really not as much work as it might seem. It actually goes kind of quickly, especially if you've got a good system down. So the first thing I do is in the area where I'm going to be building the next bed that's in harmony, that's parallel with this one, is I open the soil up with this, which is basically a keyline plow for the small context, or the market garden context or the urban context. And what it does is these tines, I try and get these tines as deep as I can, right? Drive it into the ground as deep as I can, and then I just pull the soil up and lift it up. I've actually already done this part, but I'll just give you a quick demo of how it works. Is you stand here and you give it a hop, and then you're not turning the soil over, you're just lifting it up. And what that does is it fractures the soil, it puts air in there, allows for moisture to get in there. Sometimes you get rocks. And it activates the biology and starts aiding and assisting in the decomposition process. So that's the first thing I do. So I've already done this all the way along this bed, right, further out towards the valley line. So the first step before I get going, because this pathway here is currently 2 feet wide, I mark out so that it's 1 foot wide. And so it's a little under 1 foot from here to here, but as we kind of work with things, it'll balance out. So that's the first thing I do, is I mark where the bottom of the next bed starts, right? So that I can make sure that I'm doing everything in the appropriate pattern moving from here up. Now the first thing I want to do after this is break this edge of perennial grass, and that's a really simple thing to do. Is I use this tool here, which is referred to as a mattock here on the west coast of Canada, and it might be true of most of the places in North America. It's referred to as a Pulaski sometimes, and it's a little bit different version of the pickaxe because it has this axe head here as opposed to a pick for cutting tree roots, and then it has this wide bladed, almost like a chisel type thing. So it's a very effective tool for easily breaking sod and moving material, moving soil around. And so my first move is actually one that's quite easy. I give myself a nice wide stance because you want to make sure that your feet are clear of the movement of the blade. This is a really effective tool for splitting open boots and feet. I don't advise doing this with sandals. And then all I do is I just, ever so slightly, I just give it a, you can see I'm not really hitting it too hard, right? And I just take that sod edge here and lay it over, and sometimes I like to tuck the grass there. And so I'll just move along. The most effective way to use this tool is to use its weight. So you just lift it and let it fall, and I just cut along that edge, and then I turn the sod. Now remember that my goal here is to not kill all the grass in one fast move, right? In one move. What I'm really doing is I'm trying to get the most change for the least effort, and so I'm going 50-50 plants and mechanical intervention. So obviously this is our mechanical intervention, and then we turn the soil over, and then we plant it with a cover crop. So we ask plants, the cover crop, to do the rest for us. So that's what I would do, is I'd go all the way along this edge and cut that back. Just cut that back and cut that back so that the whole edge looks like that. There. I've basically cut this pathway edge and given myself about a foot wide pathway here. And so now what we need to do is we need to get material from the pathway that's going to be built above and flip it over top of all of this, and that'll make the bed. Okay, so now I'm into the last phase of building my bed. Is I'm up above now, and I'm cutting a 2 foot wide pathway. It's a 2 foot wide pathway because, as you know now, I'm going to take 1 foot off of this bed and bring that down to finalize the pathway at 1 foot, but I cut a 2 foot wide pathway here, and so all I do is I've got the edge of my bed set, and I've got it marked out with the other stake right there, so I know where the upper edge is. I'm always keeping that in mind, and it's really important to me that I chop that. We've got some tree roots here because of these big hemlock behind us, which we'll probably next year we'll actually cut them out, because they definitely do take up a bit of shade. They take up a bit of the sunlight and cause some shade, so we're going to want to get them out of the way. And I can at least get the roots out of the way for now. And so all I do is I just chop this soil up. And then I always like to take the sod and lay sod to sod. And then, just to make the digging easier, I just loosen that soil up, which actually has a decent amount of structure to it, and I'm trying to preserve that structure because it takes soil and the microherd, the microbiology that's in the soil, a long time to build that structure. And so I don't want to come in here with a tiller and pulverize all that. I want to maintain that. That's the real benefit in soil, is when you have that structure. So just little moves, minimizing the amount of tillage we're doing. And I just take this material and I pitch it down over the edge, and I give it a little spread. And there's how our garden bed starts. And so we move all the way down this line, finish the bed, and then we move up to the next one, and we repeat the procedure that I've just shown you. The end result is that we'll have beds, a whole series of beds that look like this, that are on keyline patterning, that have the same pathway width, have been designed to fit a certain tractor size, so we can get some of that mechanical advantage. We can use some small scale machinery so that we're not stuck out here doing, heavy manual labor all the time. So we're trying to get the best of both worlds. Trying to get the best of being light on the land, but also using all this great technology that's evolved in the last 100 years with internal combustion engines and all kinds of little interesting machines that can be attached onto these two-wheel tractors to do all the same things that they would on a large-scale farm. We can take all those same machineries, all that beautiful sophistication, and it can be applied to this small-scale operation as well, so we don't have to be toiling away doing everything. Now, there's a bit of work in setting this up, but once it's set, it's permanent. So it really, really pays. It's taken me about 3 to 4 months to actually come to terms with what I was going to do here, and that's a really important fact in permaculture, is that we can spend a lot of time thinking about something before we actually do it, so that there's a lot of meaning in it, and we're not out here breaking our back at things that don't work. So when I put these pathways in, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to keep these pathways in this basic geometry from now until when I'm done with the farm, maybe 3 to 10 years from now. So that's really what's going on here, is we're working with long, slow solutions with the goal of maintaining and building soils, but also too making sure that we're not out here doing this back-breaking labor that we associate with subsistence agriculture. This is going beyond sustainable. This is going beyond subsistence. This is about creating absolute abundance and doing it well in a way that builds soil and supports the local biodiversity. Thanks for tuning in.